Welcome to Beneath Your Beautiful, where guests share stories of adversity and perseverance, which inspire, encourage, and challenge us. We embrace these tough conversations, intimately exploring our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
Hi, my name is Latoya Shauntay Snell. I am a food and fitness content creator, an athlete for Hoka, and I think I'm a kick-ass person.
I think so too, having stalked you.
Oh, little baby stalking, just a little bit.
Yeah. Did you go viral at first because of you doing the marathon and being heckled?
Yeah, I'm glad you actually said it that way. Sometimes people don't get how your life completely changes with going viral. The very first time, and I say this as a person that's gone viral several times, and most of it was kind of centered around heckling because of my size or the way that I move. So in 2017, I was heckled at the New York City Marathon. And not only am I'm a food and fitness content creator, but I'm the founder of a site called Running Fat Chef. And I created this in August 2015 because I was really tired of going out there for runs. And then I would ask people about some of these TMI things that were happening to me. I'm just like, do you ever encounter really bad flatulence? Have you ever shitted on yourself, during a run? It was like people would only give me these cookie cutter answers of their fueling and their hydration methods. And I'm like, I cannot be the only person going through all of this while being a runner. I'm like, I'm not the first plus size runner. I didn't, discover running, so I'm like, there has to be someone out there who's gone through some of the hardships I've gone through and not going to whisper it and say, you can't talk about that here, or this is not appropriate, so I don't feel comfortable. And I was like, someone has to be open about some of these things. And sometimes the person that you're looking for is yourself.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things that draws me into content creation is the ability to be able to tell your story and give permission to other people to tell their story. So I essentially created what was supposed to be a blog, a food and fitness blog that I created where I was talking about my good, bad, ugly, and outright embarrassing tales of what would happen to me at the gym, what would happen to me while running, what would happen to me while cycling, obstacle course racing, and any other crazy adventure that I would take up. And then once in a blue, we'll talk about the actual professional layer of my previous background, which was in the culinary arts of here's a recipe that I like to create. I did not foresee this being anything that would have people call me inspiring. I was just really trying to inspire myself the entire time on this journey, because it was just so hard waking up, looking at my reflection and saying, am I actually an athlete? Do I have the right to call myself an athlete compared to other people that I was typically seeing out there? They didn't even look at themselves as a runner if they were my size. Mm-hmm. And when you factor in other parts of intersectionality, like race, when it comes down to gender and how they look at female athletes in the public eye, when we talk about financial status at the time, I financially was not able to wear the Nike, the Adidas, the Hoka, the Asics sneakers that's out there. These things were not attainable to me. I was literally going to places like Payless Shoe Stores and buying these cheap sneakers that would basically run down in a matter of 2 weeks because they were not designed to be running sneakers. And some of them that were designed to be running sneakers, they were ill fit. And I just had to figure out, how can I make this work? How can I make this possible to fit in this space? The language that was not provided and the education that was not provided to me beyond the basic things that I could search on Google, I was really searching for a community. So I created this blog with the hopes that my family and friends would see it. And at the very least, they would get some good laughs out of it, because I'm very, very colorful in real life. And when I write, I'm very colorful in my choice of words. It's the background of being on open mics and doing poetry. I have an eclectic background. I've done photography. I've done open mics. and I traveled for a living at one point in my life. I love writing since I was a kid. And I just weirdly enough talk like a walking metaphor, something that I can't escape. In 2017, I found out I was pregnant and I miscarried. As quick as I found out I was pregnant, I miscarried within less than 2 weeks. And what made it worse was finding out I was carrying twins. As much baby story and all of the shows I watched during my pregnancy, holding on to my son, he's actually a rainbow baby because I miscarried before having him. So he's my special one and only.
Yeah.
Even with it, I never heard of the term vanishing twin. And I went in and I was just like, these pains are really weird. The smells was just like, I was just like, okay, maybe this is extreme morning sickness. And I just really lucked up the first time, when I was carrying my son full term.
Mm-hmm.
I figured I'd probably be a high risk pregnancy because I had placenta previa, which is basically means that the baby has no opening for the baby to come out.
Oh, okay. Typically,
this is marginal or it's full. And in my case, it was marginal. And without traumatizing everybody on here, in my case, they was like, hey, listen, we see meconium, which is poop, and his cord is wrapped around his neck 3 times and it knotted twice. My baby, who is now a teenager, a funky teenager, is a miracle. And they gave me a C-section. And the other layer that came with it is placenta accreta, which means that typically when people are cut open, they tend to bleed out. There's a lot of statistics out there as a Black woman that already makes us very nervous. It was something I actually came across a couple of days ago. We are 9 times more likely to die during childbirth while having a child.
Because
the medical negligence, we're not taken serious a lot of times. We'll say we're in pain as Black women and doctors will not believe it. Sometimes we're looked at as attention seeking, drug abusing. I won't outright say racism, but I would definitely say an unconscious bias that's happened over the years when it comes down to the medical system. And other things that come into factors are being plus size, already being differently abled. Those are other factors that works against people. So I already walked in with a sense of paranoia before even getting my diagnoses of what was going on and why I was miscarrying so much. After the miscarriage, this is like over a course of 2 days. Like the first day I went in to find out how the baby was doing, the person that was doing my internal sonogram, she was just like, oh, and then she immediately jumped out the room. I saw one person to a team of 4 to an entire team looking around. And I'm like, this is not normal, especially as a person who was already went through a high risk pregnancy. I know that having that many people inside of this small room is not normal. And that's how I found out about the vanishing twin, which essentially means you have maybe baby A or baby B that survives, but the other one doesn't. And the baby that is dissolving, one baby is eating the other baby because it's full of the nutrients.
Oh.
And then the next day, that's when I went through the miscarriage with baby A. And my mental health deteriorated at that point. I was still writing blogs, and I think that blog might still be up there to this day. But so many people wrote back to me to send their love my direction. And then somewhere along the line, I remember it was almost like foreshadowing. Someone wrote me and was like, do you have PCOS or endometriosis? And I was like, no, but I just have a hard time holding on to kids. Not even a couple of days later, the doctor from ER reaches out to me and he's like, I need you to come in as soon as possible. During this time, I was training for the New York City Marathon, the Chicago Marathon, and the New York Roadrunner 60K. I was diagnosed with endometriosis, and they confirmed it once they did a laparoscopic procedure. And my doctor was like, you are entering stage 4 endometriosis. It's not a death sentence, but it did confirm 20 plus years of being in pain and gaslit by countless doctors over and over and over again to tell me there was nothing wrong and painful periods are normal. If you are watching yourself clot, go through pain, experiencing job loss because you cannot function, your legs caving in underneath you, get a new doctor.
Right.
I say that from my really horrible experience of going through that. It takes you through this rabbit hole of who needs a heckler when your body is one.
Yeah.
I don't wish it on anyone. And I wrote about it. My close friends and family was like, you have to pull this blog down. You're going through stress. You need to speak to a therapist. And by the time I read back the blog, because I've really only read this like once, I saw all of the comments that came in, not to mention the emails that came in through my site. And people were just like, thank you, because I didn't know what I was going through. And I started asking my doctor more questions. And that's probably the only reason why I kept it up there. I was thinking about leaving the running community at that point. I was just like, I don't want to do this. I don't care what race I signed up for. That's nice that people feel inspired or they're learning their diagnoses through me, or, maybe they have an aha moment, but I'm out. I don't want no parts of this. My family and my friends started talking me into, at the very least, just commit to the rest of your race calendar for the year. And if you still feel that same way in 2018, then you never have to revisit it again. But you put in so much effort to train for this race, and running excites me in a way that I don't think any sport has ever done up until that point. Like powerlifting these days, powerlifting and running are like hand in hand for me. Like I love both of them and I consider myself a hybrid athlete because of it. But it really was the support of my family and friends telling me, why are you taking away your last joy? And I was just like, I don't deserve to have joy at this point. A part of me wanted to distance myself from this sport because I found running as really, really therapeutic. It's not therapy, but it's definitely therapeutic, that I was able to see something worthy of myself that I don't think other people could give me. And I didn't feel validated when I was looking for it in other people. It was something that I had to dig deep into myself. So I decided I was going to commit to it. I found a way to redo my whole training schedule. And I was like, I'm going to figure out how to make this work in between 8 to 12 weeks. So I get to the New York City Marathon. This is like after I finished Chicago, I get to the New York City Marathon, and race day, I'm feeling great. I'm like, all right, I can do this. I'm pepped. I'm going to go out there. I was fine until I hit around mile 21 and a half or 22. This guy screams out from the corner, it's a spectator, and he says, it's going to take your fat ass forever. So when you're already out there for that many miles and you move as slow as I do, at the time, I would kill for that time now. At the time, I was like a 6:30, 6 hours, 30 minutes kind of marathoner. I do not run that pace anymore. I will tell you that. I'm working myself back there, but I do not move that pace anymore. And that's still considered back of the pack. Like most people are already done. They showered, they had meals. I'm still out there.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing the police behind me saying, this is the end of the race. I'm like, great. I got to deal with a vehicle behind me. There's other runners out here who are equally suffering. But this is really a personal race. This is a race of my own that I'm taking on. And I got to hear some dude say, it's going to take your fat ass forever. We're fat shaming people in the middle of a marathon. So I'm just like, did I hear that? The New York City girl in me is trying to calm down my anger, because everything in me is just like, I'm going to go over there and whoop his ass.
I don't blame you.
Everything in me is just like, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to beat his ass. And then I was like, can you run that back? What did you say? And he repeated it and he said it slower. And he's like, it's going to take your fat ass forever. And whatever hell that he said afterwards, I just know that the two of us were going back and forth, cursing each other out. And so two other runners out there that literally stopped me and was like, you're so close. It's not worth it. And I kept saying to myself, I'm going to brush this off. I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to let this define me. Like, this is just a moment in time. But what people don't get is that just because a person tells you to get over it doesn't mean that you're going to automatically get over it. Mm-hmm. And when you're going through that type of suffering at that point, and like this has had to be about 5.5 hours in, all I wanted to do at that moment was to stop. Mm-hmm. to give myself permission to be angry, to give myself permission to stop, to not feel the pain. And it's like, great, I already was dealing with my own internal demons telling me at this point, I don't deserve to be here. And now I have to hear it validated by a random stranger who's not doing what I'm doing.
Right.
Tell me I don't belong here. I've been told that my entire life, and I've been put up against the word potential my entire life. So to make it to that moment and to hear someone else add on to this list of you don't belong here in the form of fat shaming, it was horrific.
Mm-hmm.
I did push through that race. I think I finished like in 7 hours. I was just so completely out of the game at that point. I wrote about it on my blog. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. I was like, all right, my regular audience is going to see this. And we're going to move ahead. And I was like, I'm going to do my ultra marathon and that will be that. Sure enough, I don't know who came across this article, but someone at the root.com saw this article. And I've been following that magazine platform for some years. They reached out and they said, hey, how you doing? We're creating a new section called the Glow Up. And I was just like, who is this person that's trolling my email? The initial email that I received wasn't even from the editor. I received it from a person who's like, I'm a retired supermodel from the 80s. Now it's like, oh yeah, this is the funniest shit on the planet. So a random supermodel from the 80s is writing my inbox. She just chose me from Brooklyn. I'm just like, and I've got my share of hate mail that came in to the site. The first thing I thought was to myself was, who is this asshole that has time? And I said, you couldn't even come up with a better story. Oh, I'm a supermodel from the 80s. Sure you are. In my head, I am the Queen of England, and I am ruling everything right now from my computer here in Brooklyn. I just didn't believe it.
Yeah.
I was like, something kept telling me, I think you might need to take this one serious. And initially they were going to feature me as like their glow up gladiator. That was what the column was supposed to be. But the editor eventually wrote me and she's just like, I'm reading through your blog and she's like, you're a fantastic writer. And I was like, oh, thanks. Not bad for somebody that dropped out of high school for 7 gym credits. And she's just like, would you be interested in writing for our magazine? Like, maybe pitching us. And I was like, I don't know what the hell a pitch is, but it's been my dream to get something published at least once. Like I always wanted to be a writer. And she's like, do you have something to pitch us? And I was like, I don't know. I kind of got heckled at a marathon once. And she's like, what? And she's like, tell me more. And I started telling her, and she's like, write the article, make it 800 words. And I was just like, I don't know how to write short stories. I know how to write long-winded ones, which is the reason why I came up with a blog. For whatever reason, the Root came across my inbox and in 925 words, because I really do not write short.
That's still pretty good. I know, because I'm doing a magazine.
It's hard because you're so emotionally invested into it when you're telling your story. And it's just like everything matters.
Mm-hmm.
The way that you felt, the air, the things that you ate. And it's just like, how do I condense this really horrible experience and inspire people to know that there's life outside of this? And in 925 words, that changed my life. They didn't tell me what day it was going to get published, but I will never forget it. It was November 30th, 2017. And around 12 o'clock, I had a following that was probably no more than about 2,000 people. All of a sudden it started to jump up and I immediately got overwhelmed. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I was like, the article published. I'm like, people are only going to care for a couple of days. Like, it's cool. I'm getting all these comments, but I never had people interact with me from around the world.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting letters that I had to get translated. I was getting emails. Oh my gosh. The amount of people that wrote on the site, it was 60,000 hits in one day.
Oh, wow.
Which is a lot. And when I thought that this was like the highest part, I was like, maybe this is the peak here. I woke up the next day and People Magazine is in my inbox and they're just like, hey, we just want permission for your photo. And I said, excuse me, what are you doing? And they're like, we wrote an article about you. I'm like, you don't even know me. You didn't interview me, but freedom of the press, the things you have to learn on the fly. And the part that I leave out on this story often is talking about how scary it is to go viral. Your life completely goes haywire and you don't know how long it's going to last. in 2017, before we had Reels or TikTok or any of those short video kind of platforms, going viral was a huge thing, especially when you think about the history of YouTube and how a lot of these creators got started. To come into this in 2017 and getting celebrated and even cursed out for being you, it's a hell of a thing. And all you think to yourself is, how do I compete against that? How do I get better than that? Who am I now going to disappoint that I never met? So I woke up for a whole week with at least 4 beers. It took me down a downward spiral. I was not able to leave out my house without someone recognizing who I was, and that I was the fat girl that got heckled at the New York City Marathon. It was scary. It was not just a celebration. I was not prepared for it. You know, I think some people are prepared for that type of stuff, especially like if they're intentionally trying to be a creator. I was not. I was anti-influencer. It's just surprising to be in this space. I was anti-influencer. I had this very skewed view of what an influencer do. I thought that influencers are out there just to get free shit.
Yeah, same.
I was like, great. They get a bunch of free products and they go out there and they lie about it. And I was like, they don't have integrity. And amazingly, being in this space, I didn't realize how much work has to be done as a content creator just to be able to provide reviews, to edit, to be the producer on your own stuff, the storytelling, wondering if something's going to hit or flop. Do you even care about numbers? And because the person that I am, even to this day, I care about numbers, but I really, really, really don't. I am so anti looking at the numbers and having that determine my worth. That is damn scary to be in this career, because it's like those things kind of matter, because that could be the way that I get my next paycheck. But even then, it took a whole year for me to convince myself, you're not going back to the culinary industry. I couldn't get a job from going viral, not because of my skills, but some places tried to hire me. And then there was a line of people who recognized me. There was like one person recognized me and they was just like, I know you from going viral on this platform, but didn't you used to do open mics? At that point, it was my first time going viral when it came down to the fitness aspect. But anyone who followed me on MySpace, another platform that is like a long, long time ago. And no, it's not really that long time ago. You know, for MySpace, I used to do a lot of poetry and people recognized me in that space. And when I started getting traction, it scared me then. I will be the first to admit, when it comes to my own insecurities and hiccups, I am terrified of my own success. I am always scared. I'm always running scared of what my failure is going to look like. Will it disappoint people? And most importantly, how much will it disappoint myself from trying the next new thing?
Is that still true?
Yeah, still true. When people ask me things like, how do you stay motivated? And I'm like, I literally use my fear as a motivator.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that they think it's something cliche. Oh, that's really cute. You've done all these marathons and you completed over 200 races. And I'm like, ask me about my failures. Ask me about my true failures. This is 2019. At that point, I was still kind of semi-quiet about some of the now growing health issues that I had, because I had a bit of shame and worry that people were going to look at me and judge me and say, she has those health issues because she's fat.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like I couldn't even give myself permission to even be sick.
Yeah.
And it was just like, great. At this point, Hoka had just picked me up as a global athlete ambassador for the first year. And it was just so much pressure. I had dealt with this bad run of trolling, of harassment, to a place where my address got doxxed. My telephone number got put out in the internet. My son's school information was put out there. Someone wrote an email to me that was, they said, send it to your husband. Tell him to blink 1 for yes and 2 for no if he's in danger.
Oh, my.
Because clearly fat people like me don't get married. And the word that surrounded me for a while was the word cheater. Because my first run in 2019, or at least my first marathon in 2019, turned into, it was supposed to be a fundraiser. My watch died. I was one of the last people on the course. I'm used to being in the back of the pack. And unfortunately, I was rerouted on this course and I didn't know. So I got to the end. I'm like, hey, 26.2, got my first marathon done. And I found out through a series of followers and a person who called himself an investigator that said, you cheated. And I was like, no, I didn't. And I'm like, I finished this marathon. And people were just like, well, look at her Strava. Her Strava says she only did 23 miles. I'm like, my watch died at 23 miles. I'm like, I'm a marathoner that moves painfully slow. Mm-hmm. This was like on average about a 16, 17-minute pace. I'm in my head thinking at this point, mile 20 looks like mile 18. That looked like mile 14. When people are like, oh, I hit the runner's wall at mile 16. I'm like, that's cute. I hit the runner's wall at mile 2. Mm-hmm. I'm always trying to convince myself, just make it to the next mile, make it to the next mile, make it to the next mile. Everything that could happen happened. And my response to it was, how fucking dare you? You write a random stranger and tell them that maybe you cheated, or even to this day, I don't like to bring up the guy's name. His platform scares the hell out of me. All I kept thinking to myself is, how can I convince a bunch of people who never even considered me, even knew my platform, that I didn't do this thing?
But also, can I just interject that running 23 miles, if that's what it was, is not a failure?
That is a good reframe. But a huge part of me, I won't say that I actually can't say I'm very hard on myself. I told myself I was going there for 26.2.
I understand that.
And it was my intention for 26.2. If I knew what happened, I would have had no problem with telling people, hey, listen, this didn't happen. To find out through an email and then having to do my own research to contact the race company and say, hey, what the hell happened here? I'm like, I showed up, I did 26.2 miles, and they're like, you got rerouted. And I'm like, nobody told me anything. I just followed the group. There was 8 to 10 people that I have followed. I visually can remember some of the people and what they were wearing, what they were doing. And I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, did all of us get rerouted? And he's like, yeah, you all got rerouted. And I'm like, so how did all of us not know? But having a large platform that gets amplified and how you respond to it is even more crucified. The drawbacks of going viral means that you also become a PR rep for yourself. Mm-hmm. So when you go out there and you have a moment of anger and disappointment, it's completely amplified. Mm-hmm. You're not even allowed to be angry when you're a public figure. You're not allowed to express yourself in a raw state. You are always counting and measuring what you do, because all it takes is one person, whether they're an opportunist, whether they coming into it with the best of intentions or anything in between. How you respond to it is all everybody looks at. Mm-hmm. And for me, I will say, I think my feelings were very raw. I was very angry, very angry. And to this day, I still am very angry, especially when I had to look at all of that negative feedback and the things that came with it. The way that I had to encounter gaslighting, the amount of friends that kept their distance from me. And I knew their reasons why. I was terrified for them. I didn't want people to be around me. It creates this form of isolation. So for me, even when I am going viral for something, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral, I am always scared. I am always scared to a place where I am in therapy. I was diagnosed with CPTSD during the pandemic. A lot of, I didn't realize this was going to be so hard to actually talk about this. I had a lot of suicidal ideation. I am thankful for my friends. I am thankful for my family. I'm thankful for a good support system. I'm thankful that the sponsors that did decide to stay with me did, because honestly, I didn't want to stay here. I didn't want to be here. People sometimes tend to say that staying here for people, like your family or your friends, is enough to not take your life. But when you can't see anything good in you or a reason to stay here, it is really hard to dig yourself out of that hole. So for me, as a person who survived it and now can thrive after it, I reworked my entire platform on what is my intention of why I'm staying here in the running community.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I love the idea of staying here now to motivate the next person to really just take a chance on yourself. To hell with the pace, to hell with the crowd, to hell with other people thinking that you're great or you're not a runner or you're not an athlete or other people counting you out. My entire platform is based off of how can I get someone to believe that they're worthy and they're worth it. I am not impressed with going viral anymore.
Yeah.
Like, at all. I look at celebrities differently. I look at mental health in a different way. I look at self-care beyond the cliche, take a bubble bath or go to the spa, get your nails done. Like, don't get me wrong. I love getting my nails done. Every week I get them done. But it is much more to prioritize my mental health above my work or anything that I do, even down to my running, before anything else in this world. It is damn scary to go viral sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not all that it is cracked up to be. Everybody doesn't come out on top and win. Some people like me lose their jobs. Some people like me, when they go viral for the wrong reasons, they lose sponsorships, they lose opportunities, they lose friends, they lose communities. I lost the opportunity to be able to run with some of the people I ran with before. And I don't really look at that as a loss. I look at that as a gain. Mm-hmm. If you do not find me to be a person that you want to run with, or you don't think I'm a real athlete, or don't think that I am putting in the work, then we don't deserve each other.
Right.
I will honor that breakup any day of the week. But it does make me very scared to go into run groups. I'm an extrovert who is terrified of people. Mm-hmm. I never thought I would be that person. I love and I thrive off of other people's energy. I love seeing people thrive and be successful, but it is so hard. Every day is a work in progress where I can see that in myself.
I really appreciate you saying that it's a work in progress, because, as an outside viewer looking in, you are trying to motivate people to just do it. And doesn't matter what you weigh. And yet it's not easy every day for you to do it yourself, which is great to know, because we are all struggling with our worth across the board. I think we all feel not enough.
Right. Yeah.
But I think we have to get there. And so when did you decide that you were an athlete, if you had trouble in the beginning saying you were an athlete?
The crazy part is that is an everyday challenge.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That is an everyday challenge. The first time that I actually believed that I was an athlete came by a person who worked for Hoka. And I had put in my initial message of, hey, today's the day I became an ambassador. And I guess my verbiage in that message, she was like, this is a strong message, but you should call yourself an athlete. And I was like, I'm not a podium runner. I'm not getting first place. I don't desire to get first place. I'm not going to get 10th place. I was like, I just want to survive it. I just want to be able to tell these stories. And she's like, if you're showing up and you're putting in the work, you do have to acknowledge that you're an athlete. And I'm like, I'm athletic, but I wouldn't call myself an athlete. And from there, we went through a rabbit hole where she's just like, I would love for you to call yourself an athlete. But I had to figure out my reason why I was deemed worthy to call myself an athlete. And by definition, anyone that looks up a Merriam-Webster, definition, by definition, is someone who is putting in the work. And I was just like, I was like, so I got caught up on the media take of the definition athlete. not realizing that this entire time I've been an athlete. We would never call an injured athlete not an athlete. We would say that's an athlete who is in recovery, but it doesn't take away from them taking away time to recover. That is part of them being an athlete. Taking care of your body is part of being an athlete. Showing up whatever way that you possibly can on a regular basis and being consistent makes you an athlete. Having the proper rest makes you an athlete. Fueling and hydration makes you an athlete. Just doing the damn work makes you an athlete. And having that perspective being told to me was something that I truly needed. So anytime that I do go into this negative space of, I don't care how many races I've completed or attempts I've made or the training runs I've put out there, the amount of times I've been in a gym where I'm just like, I want to walk away from this. I'm reminded that I do and deserve to call myself an athlete. It's something that I challenge every single day when I wake up. Like, a lot of people would think that my hangups would be on my weight. Honestly, I think that's other people's hangups about my weight. It is the one thing that I was not as bothered about as people make it sound like, oh, she uses her fat as a clutch, or the only way she can have a platform is if she's plus size. And I'm like, I beg to disagree. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, my fat is just seasoning, honey. Like, it's just seasoning. Without body weight, none of us would live and thrive and be here. So I look at when someone says you're fat, I'm like, it's a descriptor.
I have fat.
I have fat. My fat is not an identity per se. Like, don't get me wrong. I am one of those people who will call themselves a fat athlete because I understand and acknowledge that representation is everything for someone who wants to start or someone that wants to see a version of themselves. So until this becomes normalized, I am definitely going to be using that term, fat athlete, just like I use Black athlete, just like I use queer athlete. These descriptors are going to be there until we start normalizing people to show up just as they are. But I think is one of the least interesting thing about me, about how much body weight I'm carrying.
I love that.
I say crazy shit sometimes. I'm like, I think that's a lot more interesting than anything. I'm a freak about doing numbers and math in my head. That's way more interesting than how much body weight I'm carrying. My biggest insecurity and my biggest strength has always been my mind. Because if I tell my mind that I'm going to do something, I'm going to see it through. And I am very extreme about seeing it through. But the hard part about that is that when I really get into these low moments of feeling like I'm a failure, I wholeheartedly believe it. And it takes a lot of grit to continuously show up as yourself and to say, these are my positives. These are my negatives. Here's my neutral. And I'm just going to continuously show up as myself and see what my best, my 100% look like today.
Yeah.
I think if more people started to measure their success by themselves, to their reflection, we would have less trolls out here. We would have less worries about what the world thinks about us. We will probably be less critical on ourselves. Now, I'm not saying go to the mirror and say, I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. I'm not saying to go there and click your heels 3 times. Like, I don't believe in toxic positivity. But what I do believe in is consistently showing up for you. And when you do that on your worst days, on your best days, and on your neutral days, when you have that consistency, that builds up a positive body language, that builds up a positive athlete, that builds up a positive person. So even when you are going through those sucky moments, because everybody's going to go through it one way or another, and it may not have anything to do with sports. When you consistently show up for yourself, you're not looking for the validation of others. And that's what I heavily hold on to when it comes to being a content creator in this space. If I ever left talking about food and fitness, that will always be something I will advocate for. I will always advocate for you to never count yourself out.
Are you an artist?
Yeah, I'm an artist first and an athlete second. On my spare time, I like to write for hours. I love writing for hours. I'm a huge documentary nut. I will read almost anybody's biography just for shits and giggles. I love painting. I love sketching just for the hell of it. For about 10 years, I was a photographer, mostly with food, because food doesn't talk back to me unless it's dying, because there is a life and death with food.
Did you have trouble calling yourself an artist?
No. The strange part is that is probably one of the things that I naturally felt okay with calling myself. Now, calling myself a good artist, that came with some hiccups along the way, because it's just like you get caught up in this web of, I don't paint as good as this person. I don't take photos as good as this person. Oh, I love the way that this person writes. They write better than me. So, like that came across, there's moments where I'm just like going through this wave of how good am I compared to somebody else, or how good am I compared to who I used to be or where I came from. But the one thing I can say about being an artist and why I feel so strongly about that, about nobody really telling me that I'm not an artist, is that I see it manifest in different ways. Every career I've ever touched is forced me to go back to my art as a content creator or an influencer, as per se. You have to use some type of medium. I am the talent. I am the producer. I am the storyteller. I am the person who has to think up, how can I make this compelling story in 60 seconds or less to keep my audience entertained, informed, and give off this message of what I want to convey? And now, how do I match up those words with that? How do I create some type of emotion and theme? How do I keep you focused? How do I keep you here? And as an artist, when you think about that from the photographer standpoint, when we're taking a picture of something, we have a focus. So it may be a person, it may be landscape, but at some point when we initially are taking that photo, we want something to be captured in that moment. We want you to see something from our eyes. And then as your eyes scan the rest of that image, you can take in the rest of that photo. So if I have a model sitting in front of me and I find that I want the focus to be on her eyes, I don't necessarily have to get up close and personal in her face and say, look at my eyes, it's really pretty. No, we don't have to go that far. But if I have her soften up her eyes, and as a photographer, I understand the technology that I'm working with. Maybe I'm looking for aperture. Maybe I'm looking for a certain thing. Or maybe when I'm doing post-processing work, I want to brighten up her eyes just a little bit. Maybe I want the browns and the blues and certain colors to pop out. And it's like, wow, I feel drawn in. Then I've accomplished what I needed to accomplish as an artist. But the other complex part of being an artist is acknowledging that the moment you step away from your art, that art no longer just belongs to you, belongs to the community. And I take a lot of that really into my athleticism, that I do all these training miles. I go out there and I'm working and I'm working and I'm working and working. And as a content creator, when I have to combine those two worlds, I'm just like, I'm working and I'm working and I'm working, but I'm not sure. The moment I go out there for that race, I'm not sure if all of these training miles and all of these what if scenarios are actually going to turn over. There are so many possibilities of what ifs. What if I injure myself? What if I make that wrong turn? What if I do this? That's the art. That's the art. That is art in its most raw form. The things that you cannot control, the way that people are going to respond to it. But you have to ask yourself as the artist, are you proud of what you've done? Would you do it any way differently? Do you have any regrets? Does this art actually belong to me? And it's always have to be yes, even when it doesn't turn out the way that you intended for it to turn out. You're still an artist.
Right.
Nobody can take that away from you. So now for me, it's just like, how can I get that same feeling of being an artist? How can I match that up with the athletic space? Because there's so much more voices in my head when it comes down to the athletic side. Maybe because a lot of it was I did not intend or walk into this with the idea of this was going to be my career.
Yeah.
Because of the way that I went viral several times and people immediately poked at the easiest thing of she's plus size, she's different. I have to constantly battle this internal battle of how can I find that magic that I found as an artist and infuse it into my athleticism.
Yeah. I'm involved in a self-portrait challenge starting this Thursday with a group of photographers. And so yesterday, I'm 55 and the heaviest I've ever been. I'm extra large. But it was important for me the self-portrait was showing off my beauty and sexuality because that's what my heart's saying. That's what I'm feeling about myself. And I want my self-portrait to be literally an accurate representation of I can be this old and I can be this big and still know my beauty. And I'm stuck on you saying that, your failures. I think everything like your art is play and what will happen. And I'm definitely better at some things than others, but I'm not sure I would say I'm failing at them, but I'm older than you.
Yeah.
I had to get here. Maybe the idea that 23 miles, if that's what happened, is not a failure. And also you're reaching who you're supposed to reach and the haters, whatever, right?
Right.
I don't know what that feels like, of course, but I imagine people are going to be like, what's this older, fatter girl doing in this picture where I'm sexy? That's who I am, and you can like it or not like it. We'll see. Who cares? I think it's really important that we just always celebrate the wins and what didn't work out. What's Thomas Edison found a million ways of failing? I thought of you when I posted this morning. It's Theodore Roosevelt about the heckler. This is perfect. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
One of my favorites.
Why are we even paying attention to the idiot on the side of the road?
That's really all it is. It's like the idiots are loud,
Yeah, they're loud. No, I totally understand. I get that we have emotions about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like the easiest way for me to navigate through a lot of it is these days I've been dissecting. I've been dissecting it in layers. It's almost like me taking my culinary side. And it's just like, oh, okay, here's this big piece of something. And it's just like, okay, I have it in its raw state. And that's my emotions. My emotions are, I fully invested myself into training for this specific event. And then I cut down to the layers and it's just like, I went out there and I gave it my best. Mm-hmm. That's my truth. I gave it my absolute all. Sure, it didn't turn out the way that I desired for it. And those are the layers. And the other parts of it is that people decided to dissect this in different directions. Some people were just like, she did her absolute best. She had no idea it was a mistake.
Right.
Other people came in, and I realized that in hindsight, some people came in with the idea of, oh, she has to be wrong. And the thing is, I may not have been ever considered or counted or even deemed worthy in their eyes, but I never walked in with the idea of it being for them. So I always have to reshape and reframe it and say to myself, what part of this is actually for myself?
Yeah.
I think recovering from that and thriving from that 4 years later, I'm able to look at this with a different viewpoint and a different lens that now helps me, like even with like not the beyond the content creator, just as an individual, when I ask myself, who am I to me? I am able to call myself more of an athlete every single day when I show up these days, because I'm just like, I'm doing the work that a lot of people would never want to do.
100%. Oh my gosh, yes.
When you are that painfully honest to yourself of, here's the things that's happening. Here's the things that I do not control. Here's the little bit I do have control. And I'm deciding I'm going to show up. That's pretty much what I do. This is not me looking for sympathy or empathy. This is just me looking at it for what it is. When it comes down to beauty, like kind of like thinking about what you were saying about doing the self-portrait. For me, I never let an age or a size define my beauty. I think that beauty is always within.
Yes.
We talk about that sexy. It's almost like when you put that model in front of you, they could be visually appealing to a lot of people. But if they don't feel it and they don't move through it and they don't flow through it and they don't feel at their best that day, most of those emotions are going to show on camera. And I don't care how good of an actor you are.
I totally agree. And my husband was saying this the other day. He's like, oh my God, you were so sexy. And I was like, because I felt it.
Right.
I just felt sexy and I looked sexy. And I know that that's true. And I can be any size and I can be any amount of smart and I can have any face.
Right.
I really think that's why this is Beneath Your Beautiful, because I want to see inside. And the things that you go through, the hard things that you go through are honestly what I think make you beautiful.
A lot of what I do, I want people to feel comfortable being vulnerable.
Right. Me too.
Because if more of us actually did that, there'll be less to tease and we'll realize how much we're not alone. And I think that's enough for me to keep fighting and to keep showing up. You know, it doesn't matter how loud the voices get. It doesn't matter how loud my own internal thoughts can be about how I'm performing. And a lot of my hangups are really coming from a place of, this is who I used to be, and this is where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
And compiling it with health issues, which makes things very, very complex, where it's just like, I remember at a point when I was able to run like this, and now my run looks like this. And that's that back and forth way of, how do I show up as an athlete today?
Yeah. Yeah. I really love that.
Now, looking at that hard moment, I can definitely say that my failures are beautiful as well. You know, my failures are my accomplishments in a sense, because I'm able to take a step back. I'm able to feel in that moment and say, this is how I feel about it, honestly. And it may be hurt, it may be pain, it may be disappointment. But did I try? Did I put in my best? Absolutely.
Isn't that what you would tell your son?
Yeah, definitely.
Just have to parent ourselves.
Oh, I agree. I love that. I love that thought process. We have to. Like, I think a lot of us lose it as adults. We get used to telling our kids that or telling other kids. And it's like, you can be whatever you want to be. And as soon as we become whatever age, it's just like, not for myself. And it's just like, why do we put that disclaimer on ourselves that we cannot do this because of whatever X, Y, and Z box? And that's enough for me to show up. Even when I'm in doubt, I'm just like, I can't count myself out. I can't afford to count myself out, especially as an advocate. I advocate for a lot of issues around when it comes down to anti-fatness, when it comes down to race identity and things of that nature. I'm always advocating for it. But what sense is advocating for these things if I don't know how to advocate for myself?
Amen. That's so beautiful.
Loving yourself is not one-dimensional, and it's not going to look the same or sound the same every single day of the week. Take yourself as a raw canvas every single day and paint it the way that you desire to paint it, not the way that the world tells you how to paint it. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. And remember that we always have the opportunity to try again the next day when it doesn't work out the way that we want to. One day we'll look like Picasso and one day we'll look like Spaghetto.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
I really appreciate seeing your I'm like all choked up, but seeing your videos of you working out and stuff, because, you know, I'm heavy and I play tennis and I feel like I'm the fat girl who plays tennis.
Yeah. And
I just really appreciate though that you're out there and you're doing it. And so thank you for me.
no, do it afraid. Continue to do it afraid. And
yeah,
every time, even though we don't intend on walking out there being an advocate, every time we show up ourselves, we show up for ourselves, we're showing up for so many other people.
Yeah.
Because you just never know who's watching. And the thing is, it could be the smaller frame person out there who is watching, but it's just like, I get to show up. And when this person shows up, it reminds me of my child who I can't get to show up. And you just never know who you are making an impression with your form of art. And your artistry is you playing tennis as a plus size person. But the thing is, it does not define you.
No, I can move to that ball too, man. When it's coming, you'd be surprised how fast I can move if there's a tennis ball coming.
Right. And the crazy part is, it's like, we would never think this with a football player. You know, we almost celebrate them for their size. Like, you know, you expect them to be larger frame, but I think it really speaks on the really horrible and toxic conversation that's happening in the fitness space when it comes down to women and non-binary people. The conversation needs to evolve. It is too hyper fixated on how we look. And there's an entire industry that's banking off of our failures, essentially, and I put air quotes around that, our failures of how society expects us to look, to be,
Right.
how to thrive. The moment that we learn how to actually step out of our own ways, when it comes down to looking for that approval from others, and that could be other women as well, I think that's where the real work is at. And then taking away a lot of this toxic messaging that's out there, that's kind of contaminating the well for years. It didn't happen overnight. It's not going to fix itself overnight. And that's how I look at my body. My body, I don't shame it for being plus size. Honestly, I was trying to gain weight for years. And then I was like, whoa, I'm like, how the hell did I get here? You know, like, I was like, this was not that was not the roadmap. However, with it, you know, I acknowledge how much better I actually feel when I'm not hyper fixating on my size.
Oh my gosh, yes.
When I'm not hyper fixating on somebody else's perception of what I'm supposed to look like, how it's supposed to form, how it feels, or even the headlines when people are like, she's defying stereotypes. And I always beg to differ and say, defying stereotypes according to who?
Yeah.
I didn't sign up for that. You know, I'm like, the stereotypes that I did not create are the things that I'm defying. I'm like, but I didn't put these limitations on myself. You did. I didn't. So I'm always taking that in consideration.
I see that you're strong and you're powerful and you're healthy. And I appreciate that. You're giving me hope that I can be strong and powerful no matter what I look like, no matter what my size is. So I just really appreciate that.
Right.
And also recently I was talking to somebody and it really clicked in my head how to love my body rather than just accept it. And I can picture the way my husband loves my body. And all of a sudden I'm the most delicious, you know, my giant thigh is juicy and delicious, you know? And so
I love it.
I really have that image in my head, and that's so helpful that I've been loved in this body and that I can see how love looks. I feel really fortunate about that.
I agree. I'm forever telling my husband, I'm like, honey, I am delicious.
Yeah.
I am a whole damn meal. I'm like, devour me.
Exactly.
I won't say you have to, but for me, I just remember at a point where when I was smaller, I did not feel that.
Right. Same.
I feel that way about myself. I was just like, oh, I don't know. I don't look like this one. I don't look like that one. And it's just like, now I can get to walk outside in like crop tops and the whole nine. And I'm just like, and people are like, there's no way you feel comfortable. Maybe you're seeking attention. And I'm like, no, I'm wearing this because I know I'm the shit.
Right. Well, that's what the photo shoot was for me yesterday. I was telling my husband, I really want to honor this body.
Right.
I want to celebrate that we love this body.
We got to meet ourselves right where we're at.
Yeah.
And we have to treat ourselves gently with compassion and almost like taking it back to what you said, being kind to ourselves and that thought process. And I think that's what really helps us as artists. It's like when we're doing our artistry, we might be doing some things physically alone. But when we get that feedback from the public, I think that sometimes they can nurture what we're already putting out there.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what you give me, you know, when we're talking, you know, that is not just this one-sided thing where it's just like, hey, I am out here sharing my story. This is more like I'm sharing my story. And when I needed it and I need that refresher or that reminder that I am worthy, I am an athlete, I am all these things, I get to have that bounce back at me. And I think that's what my community gives me every single day. I couldn't create content without the incentive of, am I doing this right? You know,
Yeah.
Is anybody hearing this? Is the mic on? Like, you know, like the idea that people are able to see what my message is and they might actually get something much more from it. And then they share it. And it's like, that's a continuous, infinite love language that's put out there. And I love that part of being an artist, that as an artist, we put out our work, we have our intended target, but you just never know what else somebody else actually sees in it too.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Beneath Your Beautiful, hosted by Hara Allison. And thank you for your ratings and reviews. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Stay tuned.